So we already have the character, the Maya file open with this tail character. We've already set up the project properly, so it's in projects folder A2 underscore tail. You can see that it's in the scene file. Let me do this again. Delete this. All right, so to set up this character, the first thing we want to do is just pick the type of character you want. Simple, which is the default, the fox, or the beaver. So you just select this triangle at the bottom and go over to the channel box and go pick through the different options. The next thing you want to do is set up your, I guess I'm still calling it an all button, but it's basically a layer that you're going to create to act as an all button. So I'm going to call this layer tail underscore cons underscore LYR. And I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to turn it off, or I'm going to turn the visibility off. And the reason I'm turning the visibility off is so that as I add these controls to this layer, they're going to turn off, so I can know for sure that they are added. And I'm not actually going to start at the bottom. For this one, it would probably work, but I'm going to start at the extremities. And this will be important because with the human rigs with a lot more controls, generally, if you select the main control at the bottom and you add that to a layer that's turned off, everything else, because of the hierarchy, is also going to turn off, even if it's not actually added to that layer. So I'm going to start here at the end of the tail and just say add selected, and it turns off. The next one, add selected. They're turning off because they're being added, like I said. I'll do the head next. And I found that this is just a much easier, cleaner way to make an all button that is more reliable. And then finally, the bottom one. So those are all added to my layer. The next thing I'm going to do is go to panels and then layouts and 3 panes split top. And I'm going to use the bottom panel or bottom view for my graph editor. So panels, panel, graph editor. And if I right click on this layer, even if it's turned off, if I right click on it and say select objects, you can see that each one of those, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 controls are in here. We don't see anything in the graph editor itself because I haven't keyed anything, but you can see that on the left side of this graph editor, it lists everything that's selected, which is what we want. I'm going to be working in the perspective view for the most part. I may switch to the side view, but what do I need for this view? Am I going to animate to the am I going to make a play blast out of the side view or the perspective view? What do you guys think? We're always going to create a new camera. We don't want to, I shouldn't say never. Unless I specifically ask for an orthographic view or the perspective view, you just need to be in the habit of always making a new camera. So I'm going to say create cameras new, and I'll drag it out here. So I'm just positioning it. Actually, I'm going to show it in the perspective view, and I'm going to turn it off in the camera view. So I just want to see polygons, and that's it. Oh, I guess, so one thing about this rig is the head is polygons, but the tail is NURBS. So I'm going to go back to show and say, turn on NURBS surfaces, and that turns on the tail. So I don't necessarily want to see the camera here, but I do want to say look through selected in a second, but I want to kind of position it a little bit easier using the perspective view. So I can at least see where my, okay, so it's more or less pointing at the squirrel, or not squirrel, fox. And then I'm going to hit panels in my new viewer, I'm gonna hit panels, look through selected. And now I can adjust it to kind of frame it better. So one thing that we haven't really talked a lot about, and it's an important principle of animation that we just kind of overlook because maybe it's so simple, but there's the principle of animation of staging. Who can explain to us the principle of staging for us? And you're welcome to chat in the box as well if you have a comment there. Hello, anybody there? Should I call on somebody? How about Megan? What is staging, Megan?
Sorry, I'm still waking up. Staging. I'm trying to remember. It's not posing. Uh, is it like the keyframes almost when you have to set up like the key poses of the animation, or is that something different?
Well, a, a pose is important part of staging. If I was gonna, I have my camera, my computer camera on, and you can see that it's kind of a close up. It has my head and my shoulders and some of my mess back there. If I was going to animate or if I was going to demonstrate a dance to you guys, this would be terrible staging because you wouldn't see my full body. You wouldn't even see my feet on the ground. Staging really has to do with how well the camera is set up to tell your story. If it was a really emotional uh, shot, a close up like this is a lot better because you can see my face, you can see my emotions change. So that's better staging. So when you're setting up your camera, you always want to think about staging. And I just set this camera up, but I maybe I haven't picked my video reference yet. So just be ready to change your camera to better reflect the story that you need to tell. And so I'm just going to lock it here for now because I just want to get in the good habit of locking my camera. Oh, did I?
Wait, you're not sharing your screen.
Thank you. Every time. And I guess part of my problem the problem I'm having is I want to see when I'm screen sharing, it stops showing me the participants for some reason in Zoom. And I want to see everyone who's in it because I hear people coming and going, but I can't see that with screen share. Anyways, so I'll just screen share. So yeah, I have my camera and then I lock it here. And I just, the good thing about Maya, it allows you to be flexible. If you want to change something, it's fairly simple to make changes, whether it's to the rig or the animation. Well, I wouldn't say the rig, to the animation, or if you have things turned off and on, you want to reposition stuff. So you have the character set up, and you've set up the rig on this layer so that you can turn your controls off and on. But more importantly, so you can right click and say, add selected objects. So I'm going to, now that I have those, I'm going to say select objects again. And I'm at frame 0. I'm going to go ahead and hit S on the keyboard because I want all of those keyed at 0. And for some of you, I don't remember if it was this class, we had an issue with the ball bounce where the rig would break. And this safety frame really saved us because we could just go back to that frame and reposition it properly where everything was in the right position, including the main control. If we hadn't had that safety frame set, it would be a lot more work, or maybe we just start over with a new rig. So make sure you key your character at 0 in the default position. So where the tail's straight out, and you can see it's at 0, 0, 0 at the origin. I'm going to go ahead and say, we're actually going to start, well, that's good enough. it'll be, so frame 0 is your safety frame. And then once you've set it, you're going to change the very bottom left numbers to 1. And Mel said 120 frames. So we're going to set on the right side, we're going to set this to 120. You don't necessarily have to do 120. You can do a little bit less if you can still tell your story, but you don't want to do more than 120. We want to be able to get, it's going to take some time to get the tail and the timing and the squash and stretch and everything working nicely with arcs. So we don't want to spend too much time telling too much story. You want to keep it pretty simple. The other thing, make sure you have your auto keyframe toggle turned on. That's just going to make life a lot easier for you as you're animating. We already talked about animation preferences before. Make sure this is playback speed is set to 24 FPS times 1. Update view is really convenient to have it set to all. And then undo, it should by default be set to undo on and cue infinite, just to check to make sure. Also, we want to check and make sure that the, where is it? The animation, yes, tangents. We want the default in tangent to be set to clamped and the default out tangent set to stepped. And that's going to make we're gonna start animating in blocking. We're not gonna have this set to spline because that's just gonna give you the wrong view of your animation. We want to see it pop from one frame to the next for the key poses, maybe even the breakdowns. And I don't remember if I've said this in this class, but when I was working at Real Effects, my lead animator, he was the lead animator on the Bears. We had a bunch of Bears to animate on Open Season 3. His name was Eric Drobel, and you can look him up on what's it called, IMDb or his YouTube channel or whatever. He's got a lot of stuff going on. He works, I think, mostly in gaming now. But anyways, he made a really interesting point that I hadn't really thought of. You can get to really polished animation in blocking. And if you know the difference between blocking and spline mode, at least within Maya or these 3D softwares, blocking is it'll hold one frame or one pose for as many frames as you have until you have another frame posed. And then, so let's say from frame 1 to 20, it's you hold the same pose. From 1 to 20, it's just going to stay there. And then at 20, you do something different. It's going to pop to the next pose, and it's going to hold that pose until you change it at 30 or whatever. But the more frames, the more in-betweens you add, eventually, at 24 frames a second, if you're animating every single frame, you're not going to be able to really tell the difference between blocking or stepped and polish. It's spline, because you basically animated every single frame. So why do you need spline? Well, spline saves you a whole lot of time because it will calculate a lot of the stuff that you don't necessarily have to frame by frame every animation. That takes a lot of time. And that's how the Disney animators did it. They frame by frame would, they would create arcs as guidelines, but they would essentially animate every single frame, draw every single frame. And that's just so much more work. So like I said, I think the first class we had, 3D animation should get you to beautiful results a lot faster than having to do it frame by frame. So with that said, we're going to start with blocking. It's important to have your keys and probably even your breakdowns left in blocking mode, so we can really play with timing. It's a lot easier to adjust with, we don't want to get into like offsetting and then have to change timing. We can still do it, but it makes it a little bit more complicated because you move stuff off the main frames that have your keys on them. But you want to get your timing pretty well locked down while you're in stepped mode. if that makes any sense. Anyway, so just make sure that you check your animation settings. You go to preferences, settings, animation, and then default in tangent is clamped, default out tangent is stepped, and then hit save. So I changed this to frame 1. So I'm gonna, I still have all my controls selected. I'm gonna go ahead and hit S to set them at frame 1. Let's see, did that work? Yeah, it did. It just, because they're all still at 0, 0, 0, we don't see any curves here from 0 to 1. All right. Yeah, so this guy recorded a squirrel with, I don't know how many frames a second that is, but pretty nice. So the squirrel, you can see he's anticipating already. He's pulling way back and he's throwing himself forward. He's got nice overlapping action in his ears too. You can see a nice, almost straight line. Now it's an S curve. He's got a C curve in his body with the tail doing his own thing. He lands. And the tail kind of collapses down. So that's super simple. That might be, well, you could probably do that in less than 5 seconds, yeah, 5 seconds. But you know, if you want to use this as your reference, you're trying to tell somewhat of a story. So maybe he's a little bit scared, he's a little bit timid. This squirrel looks pretty confident when he's doing it in the beginning, but he's got his eyes focused on the target. He's moving up a little bit more. I like how his little hands are grabbing stuff. You don't have hands, but I really like this pullback. He really anticipates. Look at those little feet stretch. He's way up in the air. And he's preparing for his landing. He's getting his feet curled in to grab. So yeah, try to come up with a story. I mean, this could be as simple as a squirrel just jumping from one branch to the other, but story-wise, maybe this is the first time he's jumped that far. Maybe he's really nervous about it at the beginning. He finally builds up the courage and he jumps and he lands, and then he celebrates at the end. I did it, something like that. Super simple. You can do that in 5 seconds. The other ones I showed you, the Animation Mentor examples, there's a lot of bouncing around. You can hop around a lot. Just make sure you can get it all done. And of course, the other thing is you want to make sure that it's done. You want to get to polish. So whatever you're planning, you want to make sure that you have enough time to get to polish. And we have until the 22nd to finish this. So make sure that you're not planning something too grand. Always think about how you can get your project polished enough so that it's worthy of your demo reel. So I want to give you guys some time. Well, I don't know if we should do it during class time, because a lot of what you need to do right now really I mean, does anyone have any issues setting up their Maya project with their character and what's it called? Setting up your all button as a layer and then king. So what I want you to do for this, at least during class today, is of course, download your rig and then set it up like I showed you. And then, key at 0 for your safety frame, and key at 1 to actually start animating, and pick your from the 3 types, the simple, the fox, or the beaver as your character. And then, and then really just look for reference, something that that'll help you tell your story. And I don't know how much of those Animation Mentor examples use reference, but referencing is really important. You come up with ideas that you wouldn't have thought of because these are actual physics that are acting on this squirrel. And just watching his tail actually stays fairly stiff at the bottom, but I hadn't, or where it connects to the body, I hadn't noticed that before. If you watch this tail, it does, yeah, right here, it feels kind of stiff. And that's not critiquing the squirrel's animation. I mean, that's life, that's reality. But the other thing is we can push, we can exaggerate. Maybe I can make that tail squash and stretch even more. But maybe it's not necessary. So he's just having fun. He's just challenging himself. Now he's going the other direction. Maybe this is a better reference to use than when he was jumping left to right. Yeah, so just go through and pick a good reference. But I wouldn't spend too much time looking through millions and millions of references because you need to get busy. So because we want to get to polish by the 22nd. So I'm going to give you guys class time today to look for references and set up your rig. And even if you want to start animating. So if you go here, my video is like 40 minutes because it's an actual lecture that I'm walking the students through the movement. Or yeah, how my thought process and how I selected the poses. And I don't want to spend the whole class time watching this video. I'd rather you guys watch it so you guys can get that at your own pace. But maybe next class we'll go into that and everyone. So for next class, everyone needs to have their video selected, their reference selected to show, and then have your character instepped. The key storytelling poses. I guess one thing I should probably show you just to make sure that you're comfortable with it. This, in that video that I just referenced that I made, I already have the keys. The keys already posed out. So let's say I have five different poses I'm going to work through for my animation. Maybe it'll be more, but just, let's see, Megan's got a question. I must have skipped a step when downloading the rig, but it downloaded as a RAR file and won't let me put the rig in. You put the file through something to have to. So I had to open up, let me screen share real quickly. I had to screen share. I had to type in, in my search, I typed in zip extractor because it wouldn't use the extractors that I have. And it opened up, and then I said open zip. And then I went to the file that, wherever it was, yeah, this one. And then it said open file. That's how I did it finally. But it was giving me a lot of problems opening with zip extractor. But you shouldn't even have to do that because I already unzipped it for you guys, and you should be able to find it like I showed you in the folder, the Google Drive. I have that up somewhere. I think I still have it up. Yeah, so here's our Google Drive. If you just grab, so here's our class. If you just go to the bottom of the class folders, and then the very bottom is the file, and this is already unzipped, and it's already a .ma. So that should save you some hassle. And then let's see, Adeline. Oh, okay. So if you look on the chat, Adeline has shared the 7-zip link. Okay, so just for the sake of walking through this, let's say I need to start keying this because I have an idea of what I want to do with it. I'm just going to go down to my first pose may not be, you know, from 1 to 10, there may not be anything really different. So maybe I'm just going to hold that frame. Oh, another thing that's really important with animation, on the front end and on the back end, you want to make sure to give your audience enough time to see what's happening. With the ball bounce, we kind of went right into animation from frame 1 to frame 6. 6 frames is 1/4 of a second, you know, because there's 24 frames in a second, and 6 times 4 is 24. So 1/4 of a second really isn't a whole lot of time to let your audience get adjusted to the action or what's happening on screen. So I'm actually going to say I'm going to at least 24 or even 25. It's a lot easier for me to think of 25, 50, 75, 100. That's close enough to 24 frames for me. So what I do is I'll go to frame 25 and I'll hit S. So for 1 second and a frame, actually 1 to 25 is 24 because I'm starting at 1, not at 0. But for those 25 frames, I'm already in my first pose. So first of all, my first pose should not be my default pose. Make sure, and this is for everybody, really important, we don't want to start this character in default. We started the character at default on our safety frame at 0, but we don't want to show that. So already I need to think of how I can get this character into pose. So maybe the tip of the tail is, or the base of the tail is down, and then I start to arc it up and then down. So already I'm not in my default pose anymore. I've already posed out my tail a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit higher. I don't know. I'm just trying to change it up so it doesn't look like default pose. So because I made those changes, I'm going to go back to my All button, select objects, and from 1, you can see there's a change from 1 to 25. I'm going to select 25 and delete that because now I want to hold that same pose from 1 to 25. Maybe at 25, he starts to anticipate. So I'm going to anticipate, I believe it's the top one. If I hit, actually, yeah, this is the squash and stretch. Yeah. So maybe he's going to squash down, and I can't really pull him back I can't squash him in the Z axis. So I'm going to grab the main control and maybe I'll roll him forward just a little bit. And maybe the tail is going to go much higher now because he's anticipating. Something like that. Let's see. And if I deselect, and I want to reselect them, just remember, you go to your layer that you created and say select objects, and you can select them all. Just make sure, and I do this all the time, it's so silly. If I'm going to move everything, remember, you're not moving all of these controls at once. If I do that, actually, this rig doesn't break. Sometimes if you do that, the rig just explodes. And yeah, it's kind of, you don't want to move everything all at once, or you don't want to rotate everything all at once, and you don't want to scale everything all at once. The only reason you want to have everything selected is to key it. So just to hit S. So here's my first 2 frames. He sees his object, he anticipates, and let's say, I don't know, I'm just going to say 50 just to keep it simple. So this is another second away. Maybe he's way up in the air at this point. So I'm going to go back to my default position there. I'm going to drag him way up in the air now. Another thing to remember, you can see I'm dragging him up using the main control, not this triangle at the bottom. You want to save this for if you, like I said before, I think I told you guys, when you introduce a character, when you import a character into a scene, you use this to position it for your camera. Like if it's some other part, if it's not at the 000 position. But once you've done that, you really don't animate this anymore. To get your character walking or moving, generally you use the main control. I guess in gaming it might be a little different because you'll animate the character walking like in a loop on the zero, on the point of origin, and then you can animate this forward. But for our purposes, we're not so much focused on animating this. We want to animate the body moving our main control at the top. So maybe he's way up here. He's gonna position. I'm trying to get a C curve out of his tail now that he's falling down. And you can see he's kind of out of camera already. So that's something I need to think about also is how do I need to position my camera to keep him in scene? Maybe I unlock my camera and I adjust it so that I'm trying to find a balance. I want him to be able to jump up there high and stay in frame, but I also want to make sure that at the bottom, he's not too close to the edge. And that looks like it's a decent compromise right there. So I adjusted my camera. I'm gonna go ahead and lock it again. And then I'm gonna go back to animating. So I have my all button, select objects. I keyed it at 1, 25, 50, maybe even at 50. Maybe I'll have him pointing more down. I don't know. I'll show. I'm going to go in later and probably make more adjustments, but I'm trying to remember what my video reference did. All right, so I repositioned him, and then if he goes up, he's got to come down too. So let's say another second later at 75, he hits the snow, or he could. So I'm going to take the main control. Oh, sorry. I'm going to take all my controls, select all. And then at 75, I'll hit S to key everything. And then now I'm going to take the main control and drag him down. And maybe he's pointing even more down. And he's also moved forward to complete that arc. Maybe he's actually gone through the ground a little bit because he's in the snow. And this tail, maybe I'll flip that around so that it looks like it's all kinked because he's something like that. Oh, let me do one more. Yeah, I'll just flip it around for now. So I only have 1, 2, 3. Oops. Oh, okay. The reason I thought I was going to go frame by frame. The reason it's skipping from 25 to 75, it's skipping that top arc. The top of the arc is because right now I have selected the tail control. If I selected if I had gone here to select objects and selected all of them, then it would go all of them. Or I've also keyed everything. It's the main control, but that was more what I was looking for, up and then down. And then maybe I have a couple more, I have 5 seconds. So maybe at frame 100, he pops his head up. Oops. Yeah, I'm selecting the main control. And maybe he looks at the camera now because he's showing you what he captured in the snow. And maybe his tail's definitely got to do something different. So, and if you get the tail all twisted, sometimes it's easier just to select all the controls on the tail and set the rotations back to 0. So you're at default. And then from there, you can give it a new position. Sometimes it's easier to work from default instead of having to, go through each one of these and find a better position from where it was. So whatever makes it easier for you is just remember that all these tools are supposed to help make this easier for you to animate. And if they're not, then we need to figure out something that works better. I don't know, we'll just say something like that. So I'm going to select all. So I keyed it at 100, and maybe from 100 to 120, I'm going to keep that pose. So if I play this, so we're not focused on timing at all. Each pose is only held for 25 or 24 frames or 25 frames, whatever. But what's really nice about this is, let's say that I decided he goes up and comes down much faster than faster than a second, or maybe longer actually. Let's say it takes him longer. So I can just make a marquee around. So again, I select my layer and I hit select objects, and then I select 75. And let's say I want to add 10 frames to that. I just drag it down to 85, or I can just type in 85 here with that selected. And then I can play with timing. Maybe this right here, maybe I don't want him anticipating so long, staying in this anticipated pose. So maybe I grab this stuff, hold down shift and drag it to, I don't know, 30. And he gets up faster. Maybe he does a little spin up in the air to make it more exaggerated. But this is where you want to make big timing changes, because you haven't started offsetting. So it's easy to grab everything at once, like I've been doing here or here, and just changing it. Maybe all this stuff needs to follow down here. Maybe at the very end, his little, whatever, his rodent that he captured. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Maybe the rodent he captured gets away. So let's say this is 100. Oops, not 10, 100. And maybe I'll save the last, I don't know, maybe I'll even make it 90. If I wanted to add one more little story element, maybe the little rodent gets away. And for the last, let's say at frame 100, he changes direction because he's watching the little thing get away. And I could change the tail to, I'll put these back to 0. Maybe I'll curl them up this way. Well, I don't like how, so this is an important thing to study. If I hit 7, you can see that I'm in, well, 7 is on your keyboard is lighting mode. And because we don't have lights, it also creates a nice silhouette. And every once in a while, you want to check this to make sure that your silhouette looks nice. And this is not a nice silhouette because the tail and the ear become one. So I need to reposition, maybe to have some negative space between the tail and the ear. So if I go back to my perspective view where I'm working, maybe I need to give this more arc, and then maybe lower the base of the tail, and maybe even rotate it this way. There we go. Now we have some negative space, a little bit of negative space. And I don't know, maybe he just pops up. Oh no, he got away. And then for, he just holds that pose. I don't know. Let's say to frame 5. I'll just hit key, and I'm just randomly making this up. Maybe he's surprised at this point because the squirrel got away. So he kind of pops up out of surprise. Maybe I'll add a little bit more rotation on the tail to make him look more surprised. And then the last pose that I'll hold maybe frame 10, he's going to be kind of sad because the squirrel or whatever, the rodent got away. So he kind of, you know, splots down. Maybe the tail goes the other direction. Again, showing sadness. You want to try to think of the whole body, how you can get the whole body in to tell your story. It'd be nice if these ears had some controls, but even just doing the squash and stretch, you can see that the ears are kind of helping a little bit. They're kind of going down, but I'd like for them to flatten even more, but you know, we're limited with this rig because it's not really built for super high polished animation or super high polished, you know. Anyways, so maybe he kind of curls his tail in a little bit because he's sad, or I don't know. And he's going to hold that frame to the end. Select objects. So now if we watch, in fact, I'm just going to watch this story in silhouette. So I can see that those changes that I made, they happen way too fast. You can't really tell what's happening. He goes up and goes down too fast. So again, I would adjust for timing. And because I have everything selected, this probably takes way too long. So I could steal from that, maybe 5 frames or so. And then maybe this is too long too. So I could just give myself more time that I need. Maybe he stays here too long. I can just adjust and I play it. Anyway, so yeah, I just put in some quick, simple frames, key poses that I'll most likely go through and adjust all of them, but I'm telling a quick story. And I'm adjusting the timing very easily by using the graph editor with everything selected, select objects, and I have all my keys selected. I can very quickly make adjustments. Also, I left enough time, at least a second in the beginning, to give my audience time to see what's going on, to understand, okay, there's this fox that looks like he's hunting. And at the end, oh, he's sad, whatever he was trying to capture got away. Yeah, that's a little bit less than a second at the end. Maybe I don't need a full second. Maybe I just take this to 20. Maybe I drag everything back between 1 and 120. So I just stole 5 seconds from the first frame, the first pose, and I gave it to the end pose because I dragged everything in between those. So do you guys have any questions about what I'm doing and how I'm working in the graph editor? I'm gonna stop sharing. I don't see any chats. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is Eve. So
Thank you,
when we are moving our rig, just to clarify, the bottom triangle, does she move? Do we ever manually move her, or is that like a no-go?
Well, that's what I was saying. Generally, you're not gonna animate, you're not gonna move this so much. You're gonna bring this is designed to bring the character into your scene and then position your character to the camera, because your camera may be, you know, your camera may be way over here because you have props and other characters that are off the 000 coordinate. So you would drag your character over here and then your animation happens over here. But you just use this to bring your character with all your animation to that position. For our purposes, because these are really small scenes, we don't have a lot of props. We don't have a lot of characters. you really don't need to animate this at all. It's good practice just to add it to the all button over here. And you can see that I've keyed it. If I just select this one, let's see. I thought I keyed it. Maybe I thought I did when I hit S.
We don't. Oh, sorry. I like something about that. Like I've been watching you doing this. Something about that just didn't click for me, that we don't add the triangle into our like layer things. I think that's why last time for the ball bounce, I was having an issue.
Well, what's weird is I thought I did add it, but I mean, it is, let's see, it's called the control root. And if I go through here, yeah, it's on here.
Oh.
It's right here.
I don't know. It was just being weird then.
But I don't know. I'm surprised that it doesn't have any keys because I hit set key with everything selected.
And then also to clarify, all of our keys are going on, are they going on the main body control or are they going on the main root control?
I'm not understanding your question. The main body control, like this one?
Like the middle one out of like the 3 circles. Sorry, I can't see your screen right now.
Oh, am I not screen sharing? Darn it.
It must have turned off.
I turned it off because I wanted to see if anyone had questions. Okay, so sorry, here's my screen again. I keep doing that. So this is the main control. This, yeah, when you drag this around, oops, hold on, why did I do that? Where did it go? I don't know. I accidentally moved the root. Okay, there we go. So yeah, when you're wanting to move your body and all the controls with it, you select the main control around the head, the biggest middle circle. You can see as I do that, the top control, the tail controls, they all follow. Okay. Because of the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. And then, so we're putting all of our keyframes. Are we, okay, yeah, so then we're putting them on the main body con. I think that was also my issue list. I think I missed that guy.
So, when you're, how do I want to say this? Let me go back to 0 for a second. Okay, so here's our default pose. And you can see that if I right click and hold and say, or right click and say select objects, the difference between frame 0 and frame 1 is just a tail. And I need to maybe do a little bit more. Maybe I'll just at frame 1, maybe I'll select this and I'll rotate him down also, just so there's a little bit more change between 0 and 1. So we don't want to start out with, and I want to make sure everyone is clear about this. When you start your play blast, you're starting at frame 1. You never show frame 0 on your play blast. That's your safety frame. So I'm going to change these back to 1. And again, from 0 to 1, there's really, I guess this is still in default pose. Maybe I could do a slight change already, a little bit anticipation. I don't know, the bottom is, I don't think I want to drag the bottom, but you don't want the especially with a human character, and I keep referring to a human character because eventually we're going to get into that. And there's so many things that apply to what we're doing right now to our human rig. A lot of my students, I would say most of my students with a human character, with the default pose for the thumbs is straight out like this. And nobody walks around with their thumb like that. It's going to hit your side. You don't want to poke yourself with this big old thumb. So the natural position is just more relaxed like this. But I have so many students animate their walk cycles with this thumb stuck out, and just change everything so that the arms aren't straight out here. The default pose should not be the same as your starting pose. You want to make little adjustments so that when I frame through from 0 to 1, you can see that it's not the same pose. There's slight changes made because this is not really a storytelling pose. This is just as it came in. there's no emotion. There's, you know, it's just a stiff tail. Anyways, so yeah, make sure that you make that change. And then I keyed, you can see that I have the top selected. I didn't necessarily change squash and stretch in every pose. Maybe I should have here. Maybe I should have stretched it a little bit to look like a squash when he hits the ground. But that's what I'm talking about. I would go back through and make little changes to improve the animation from here. And then maybe at this point now it needs to stop stretching. So I go back up to the top pose of the top control. Maybe I get it back to its default position. Does that make sense? What I'm talking about as far as you're trying to go through and find a good pose for each control that is contributing to your story. And sometimes maybe, like, I'm not necessarily from these two frames, 57 to 67. Maybe I'm not really making any changes to the squash and stretch. Maybe I need to, because I have so few controls. Maybe I need to make a minor adjustment there. But yeah, just go through and be aware of the controls that you have available to you and how they can help tell your story, tell a more compelling story with because, you know, we don't have a mouth that's going to talk. You can add some sound effects, but for the most part, we're relying on body language to tell our story and action. So how can I, maybe there's a slight tilt in the main control to make him look like he's thinking or whatever. But yeah. Any other questions about setting your keys or anything else? I'm going to stop sharing again. Someone can remind me to reshare when I need to. Any other questions? So the main thing I really hope you guys get used to is working in the graph editor. You can, of course, you can certainly pose out your character in the viewer. You don't necessarily have to adjust your poses in the graph editor. You can, but really, I want you to get used to seeing the graph editor with your poses at the same time, especially for timing purposes. So early in our animation, we want to be able to adjust all the timing or you know, pieces of the timing, all the keys, all the controls that are keyed. I want to be able to select those and make them happen sooner or later together. And then after I'm finished with keys and breakdowns, maybe when I start to get to in-betweens and I start to doing some offsetting where what the tail does happens later than what the rest of the body does, then it gets a little bit, you can see some areas where it could get a little more confusing. So maybe by that point, I'm already in spline and I don't need to have all the timing happening all at once, if that makes sense. All right, well, that's pretty much what I wanted to show you guys today. I just want to give you guys class time to find your references, maybe even set down your key poses. But for next class, well, I guess the other thing I could show you just, again, play blasting. Because yeah, for next class, I need you to submit a play blast. And just to make sure that I have everyone on the same page with that. Someone's got their, I think it's Faye. There you go. Thank you, Faye. So I don't necessarily want to see it in silhouette. So I'm going to hit 6. My camera 1 is, I'm animating to a camera. You can see I'm not animating to the perspective.
You got to resume your screen share.
Thanks. Okay, so I was in 7 because I was looking at my silhouette. I actually want to see your character with color. So you just hit 6. The things that I want to see in your camera from the play blast, camera name down here, frame count. I don't need to see the view axis over here. Oh, also you can see I can see the default pose. I don't want to see the default pose, so I'm going to change this back to 1. And so now I'm on my first pose. I'm not just jumping right into my motion, but I'm giving my audience a little bit of time to understand, okay, there's Fox on the camera. Maybe I need to adjust my camera again because he's clipping too much at the top. So I'm gonna unlock my camera, maybe pull back just a little bit more. Oh, so that's the other thing. When you as you maximize your camera, and even if I hit Control spacebar, this is what we want to see. Control spacebar. That's the true play blast we want to see. There's too much clipping through the tail, so I'm going to hit Control spacebar again, and then just tap the spacebar once. And I'm going to pull my camera back a little bit more. Maybe pull it back a little bit more, just so that I can keep it from. Well, it's still doing it. Maybe I'll pull it up. Let's see. Yeah, I'm just checking to make sure that my camera is in good shape for staging. And it might be too close to the ground. We'll see. No, actually, I think he's okay. So my camera's in good shape. He's not clipping through the top anymore. He's not going very far. Maybe, well, I want to give, so he's going to look to the screen right once the little rodent gets away. So I want to give the rodent a little bit of frame to get away. So I'll have some negative space there. And then he kind of takes a big huff and just kind of sighs because he's disappointed or whatever. So I think I'm ready to go. I have everything I want for my play blast. Everything's in good shape. I right click on the timeline. I say play blast options box. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. So I did get an email from IT about QuickTime. So I guess QuickTime is no longer serviced by Apple anymore. So I guess they use VLC in the labs. So you should be able to, if you're in the labs, you should still be able to access H.264 as your encoder. But as far as QuickTime, I was still able to get, I had to, if you type in a search, there's a search you can do for QuickTime to download QuickTime, because it's still available. It's just not, I don't think it's through Apple anymore. Anyways,
but in the school labs, we can't download QuickTime because since we're logged in as guests, it'd have to be one of the teachers to do it.
Yeah, you can't do it from your labs, but if you're at home, if you want to work on that at home. But AVIs are going to be really big, and you want to be able, I don't know that if you can use H.264 with AVI, maybe that will help, but I'm not sure that you can. Anyways, make sure your quality is set to 100. Make sure your scale is set to 1, frame padding is 4, and then save to file is checked. So I'm going to hit Control C to copy this movie file name. I go to Browse. You can see that it defaults to my movies folder in my tail project. And I just hit Control V to paste that name so I don't have to retype it. I say save. And now, before I hit Play Blast, I'm going to hold down Control and just tap the space bar once to maximize my screen, and then I hit Play Blast. And it's not going to take very long to cycle through the animation because it's not very big. And it automatically plays it for you, at least with QuickTime. I don't know if the other ones. And then the last thing, of course, is to drop it in your project folder in Google Drive. So I think everyone did that before, so I don't need to go through that. But yeah, that's the next thing you would do is drag and drop it for Thursday's class. All right, so again, I keep finding other things I want to share with you guys, but that's pretty much what I want to see for Thursday is just your key poses. Maybe you've played with timing a little bit, but also, so your key poses and the video reference that you're using.